My friends, it is actually clear that when you look at the gospel reading, to feed is to love, and to love is to feed. In one of the resurrection stories of Jesus, when the Lord himself have decided to meet Peter and some of the disciples in the seashore for the breakfast meeting, I cannot forget the word of Jesus himself that after the feeding, the Lord said to Peter, "Do you love me?" And Peter said, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." "Then feed my lamb or feed my sheep." We cannot deny the reality, my friends, that for the Lord himself, to feed is to love, and to love is to feed. And there are so many instances in the gospel reading where we have seen how the Lord will always instruct his disciples to do the feeding. Do you remember that beautiful story on the miracle of feeding the 5,000? When the Lord suddenly realized that he need to do the feeding. And so he called the disciples and said, "Feed them." Actually, I was also struck by this little boy when he decided to give his 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. The boy knows the meaning of loving, which is basically feeding. And so because of the generosity of the boy and also because of God's loving mercy in feeding, he was able to feed the 5,000 people. Do you also recall that beautiful story on the Last Supper? When the Lord is about to die, and yet, he decided to forget himself because he realized maybe that the disciples are also hungry. And so, he decided to have that Last Supper, but in the process also, he also instituted the Eucharist. And this becomes our own daily bread, spiritual bread for all of us. Feeding is indeed very important. Do you recall also the story of Emmaus, where the 2 disciples are walking along the way towards Emmaus because they decided to leave Jerusalem, the mission? But in order for them to recognize that it is in feeding, and this is basically the mission, it was again in the breaking of the bread, in the feeding, that the 2 disciples suddenly opened their eyes when they recognized Jesus, and they returned to Jerusalem, I guess to do also the feeding. My friends, it is actually clear that when you look at the gospel reading, to feed is to love, and to love is to feed. This is the call for all of us. What about you? If the Lord will be in front of you right now, do you have moments of feeding also? How do you show your love to your brothers and sisters? Especially right now that we realize that we are in poverty. Our country is in poverty. What kind of feeding are you doing right now? Feeding here does not necessarily mean feeding our own stomach. There are many people who are hungry of understanding, hungry of love, hungry of forgiveness, hungry of friends. They need to be fed. But it takes a person who knows how to love to be able to do it. Are you one of them? If the Lord is here in front of you and he will say, "Do you love me?" What is your answer? If your answer is, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you," the Lord will just smile at you and he will say, "Then feed my people."